Now, we also like to begin the session with a blessing, as we call it. And for that, we have another Alakai behind the camera. That's Stuart. Stuart does all kinds of wonderful things.
Aloha, everybody. I invite you to visualize a few things as I do this little blessing. Whether you do it with your eyes closed or open is up to you. Amaku aloha mahalo. We give thanks today for our ability to choose what it is we want in this life, for our ability to focus on what it is that we want to focus on, our ability to focus on the things that bring us joy, our ability to focus on things that don't bring us joy, that we can turn our focus away from, our ability to add to the beauty and love and joy of the world by how we vibrate. And we do that, of course, with what we're focusing on. So I invite you to feel into the blessing of choice. The choice on what we focus on our choice to not focus on the things that bring us down or make us angry, but our ability to choose to focus on the things that bring us joy and to hold our focus on these things. For all the many blessings of this life, mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. Mahalo.
Mama. Mahalo, very nice. All right, now we like to begin with, after that, we're a second beginning. We like to do a Hawaiian legend related to the topic of the day. So the legend that we're going to do is a legend of Big Island. Not absolutely certain, but probably from Ka'u. Ikawakahiko, Mamua Loa Okapenakuke. Once upon a time, long before Captain Cook, in a place called Paula, like I said, probably in the southwest of this island, there was a woman who gave birth to 4 daughters. Now the firstborn was Moholani. Moholani was beautiful right from birth. And she was given the name Lani. Usually in those days, in the ancient times, when someone had the name of Lani added to their name, it almost always meant that they were part of the elite, they were part of the aristocracy. And the name, it's not always easy to translate Hawaiian names, but it sort of means the unfoldment, especially the heavenly unfoldment, particularly if we're talking about how leaves unfold. Okay? It can also mean the heavenly champion, but I don't think it means that, because the story's got nothing to do about her being a champion of anything. So probably it was the unfoldment. The second, third, and fourth sisters were all named after the Wili Wili tree. Now the Wili Wili tree, if you don't know it, it's an endemic tree to Hawaii. It's very light wood, almost like balsa wood. It grows, can grow in the uplands, grows a lot more closer to the coast. The wood was used for fishing floats, and it was used for outrigger booms. And the word wili means to twist or turn or refuse. And so it's interesting, the tree itself, you can see why it got the name. It has a twisting trunk. The flowers turn over, if you look at them, and when the seed pods, which are usually quite nice, beautiful, made into leis, the seed pod, the pod twists open to release the seed. So all of that has to do with aspects of Wili Wili. Now the first sister, next youngest, her name was Wili Wili Ohe Ohe. And this refers to her hair, which was very coarse and twisted, like coarse twisted grass. Okay, it didn't look good. The next sister was Wili Wili Pea Pea. Now, this means, would have to do also with her hair, because her hair was always looking dirty and tangled. And that's what Pea Pea means. And then the last sister, the fourth one rather, was Wili Wili Kuapu. And this actually means twisted humpback. Okay, so not very good for any of them. As the girls grew up, unfortunately, they were always being compared to their more beautiful sister. And by comparison, they were called ugly all their whole lives as they grew up. Well, what happened because of that? They grew up feeling ugly, and they grew up with an ugly mind and ugly behavior. By the time they were old enough to marry, Moholani, of course, married this beautiful, probably again of a chiefly family, a man who was handsome and vigorous, and we'll give him, we don't have the name in the story, so we'll give him the name of U'i, which means handsomely vigorous. Okay? And so they were very happy. The Wili Wili sisters, though, we can call them that, unfortunately were so ugly that nobody wanted to marry them. So, of course, added to their pain was a great jealousy of their sister. Well, U'i had the habit of every morning he would go out onto the reefs, and he had one of these fishing nets. You've probably seen them. If you looked at it, it's in a circle. If you laid it out, it's a net in a circle, and it's got weights tied to all the edges. And so the fisherman goes out on the rocks, and he stands there and waits until he sees sign in the fairly shallow water of the tide pools and off the reef. And he can recognize by the way the water acts whether there's fish down below. And so he twirls that thing around and tosses it out, and the experts, it goes out in a perfect circle, drops down and catches the fish. And so he would do that to help, the food for the family. Other members of the family were farmers, and so they had a lot of things going on, but that's what he did every day. Well, he didn't know this, but after a while, this took over a period of time, after a while, he was being watched. And he was being watched by two kupua. Now, a lot of you who have studied with me know that we use the term kupua to refer to a Hawaiian form of shamanism, but the word kupua can be used in Hawaiian, especially in stories, for any magical creature. Doesn't even have to be human. Well, in this particular case, it was two kupua sirens. We would know that by that name in English. Not mermaids. I mean, they're often pictured like mermaids, but these were just sirens, and they could take any shape they wanted to. And so what the sirens do, if just in case anybody not familiar with that, it's more of a European kind of or Mediterranean kind of a tradition where these beautiful women or these magical creatures with the appearance of beautiful women would sing on the rocks as the sailors were going by in their ships, and they would lure the ships over so they'd crash on the rocks. Then they would either keep the sailors to play with, or they would take them down and eat them. That's the typical siren. So these were Hawaiian sirens. Okay? So kupua women, and they took the form because they were watching this guy, and hey, he was U'i. He was strong and healthy and vigorous. So they decided that they were going to take him as their lover. So they came up on the reefs, and they used, as in the form of exceedingly beautiful women, and used all their wiles and all their singing, and they lured him into their arms where they took him down to the bottom of the sea. Now, you say, why didn't he drown? Because they were magical creatures, okay? Let's not have any problem with that. So down they took to the bottom of the ocean and went into their cave. There they did what they did. Well, Moholani was very upset, of course, when U'i didn't come home that night. And even more upset when the next day arrived and he still wasn't home. So she went looking for him, looked all over the reefs. Now, there was this fear because this is a common thing in Hawaii, that there are rogue waves that can come out of the ocean at any moment's notice. There's no way to predict them, and they can sweep even experienced fishermen off the reefs. Okay, we get some of that happens every year. But Moholani had a real good intuitive sense. One of the things I need to mention as part of that intuitive sense, so that the story makes sense later on, is that she and her husband had a child. And the child's name was Kawila Makeha. Was it Lani? Yeah, it was, Kalani. And he had some very intuitive abilities from the time it could be told when he was born. So he was handed over to some gods who took him away to one of the 12 hidden secret islands of Kane, which may be in the clouds, maybe over the horizon, maybe under the ocean. Nobody knows because they're hidden. But they took him to train him. Now at first this might seem, why did they give the child up like that? This was Hawaiian tradition, long-term Hawaiian tradition in the past, where when a child was born, very often, right away, not always, but often right away, it would be handed to uncles or aunties or grandparents to raise. And this is most particularly done so that the child, after the child was tuned in, and maybe a kahuna or an elder would tune into the child and see what its capabilities, the possibilities were, it would be turned over to be raised by those who could raise it and teach it that skill. Right? So that was not an unusual part of Hawaiian tradition. So Kawila, as we'll call him, his name means lightning flashes in heaven, would be a translation. So anyway, he was raised by the gods. So now Moholani is looking for her husband. She doesn't feel like he's drowned, but she can't find any trace of him. So she finally goes to her sisters. And she goes to the next youngest sister. And she says, "Willy, Willy, ohe, ohe, have you seen my husband?" And the sister hissed at her. And she says, "That big ugly man? No, I haven't seen your big ugly husband." And she went back in her hut. So Moholani goes to the next sister. Okay. "Willy, Willy, pe'a, pe'a, have you seen my husband?" "That big ugly man?" She laughs. "No, I haven't seen your big ugly husband." And so she gives a snort of disgust and goes back into her hut. Finally, she comes to the third one. And she says, "Willy, Willy, kua, pu'u, have you seen my husband?" And this one laughs, really laughs out loud. And she says, "Yes, I saw your big ugly husband. He was out on the reefs, and he was taken by two kupua. He was taken by," I got their names here, okay, got to have them. He was taken by Ahi. Yep, okay, excuse me the pause, okay, but he was taken by two kupua whose names both began with Ahi, okay, and one was Ahi, which means yellowfin tuna. And her name meant fierce Ahi. And the second one was also yellowfin tuna, but it meant shape-changing Ahi. So they were the ones who took him, and the one sister knew this, and she had seen it. Well now, Moholani has nothing to do but cry and run home and weep for her husband for a while, and finally, after she calmed down a bit though, the thought came to her mind about her son. So she says, all right. She went in and she sat down and she prayed to the gods who were raising her son. And the prayer was heard. And her son appeared before her. And she told her son everything that happened. And he listened and listened. And once he had all the information, after they, of course, greeted and honied and had their affection for each other because it had been a long time. But then he goes over to the reefs, dives down. And he dove down. Now remember, he was a kupua too, so he could shape change. So he took the form of a shark, a great big shark. Went down all the way down to the ocean floor outside the cave of the two Ahi Kupua sisters. So he's out there and he says, "Release my father." And they came, he could see their shadowy forms in the entrance to the cave, and they laughed and they said, "Go home, shark child, and take your petty magic with you. We're keeping this man as our lover for as long as we want." And he says, "Petty magic?" He says, "I'll show you what cloud magic is." And he released a bolt of lightning that skidded across the floor of the ocean and went into the cave. And there was a loud screaming and sounds of terror, and then this big boom. And then finally out from the cave comes this school of fish. The lightning had cut up all of the Ahi sisters and had turned them into a school of opelo, which is a type of mackerel. Okay? And so then he went in and he rescued his father and he brought him back up, and they had a happy reunion with the family, with the wife anyway. And we know, there are still opelo schools in the oceans around here today. So we know that part of the story is true. And we know what we're told is that Kawila came down and lived with his family and helped protect them and raised a family of his own eventually. We know that the Wili Wili sisters, now because of what they had done, the Wili Wili sisters were all turned into Wili Wili trees. And Wili Wili Oi became the type of Wili Wili tree that has very few leaves, like her hair, okay? Wili Wili Pea Pea became a tree where all the leaves flutter at the slightest breeze, all looking kind of tangled all the time. And Wili Wili Kuapu'u turned into the kind of Wili Wili that has the most twisted kind of trunk. Okay? And so that's what happened to the story. That's how it went. Pipiholo Kika'au, so goes the story. Now, the topic for today is how to deal with criticism. And we can see a lot of elements of criticism in that story and a lot of the effects of it. But now let's start talking on a practical basis for us here in the world as it is today. The first thing, we have to understand criticism in order to be able to deal with it. There are two main types of criticism. They're not the same at all. One of the type is what we can call critical analysis. Now, this is a highly developed skill. Hawaiians had, it's in the dictionary, you can find 14 different words for types of criticism. But only one word, it's called paka, refers to what I'm talking about right now, critical analysis. Critical analysis, an example would be, it's when you evaluate somebody's behavior or something's behavior with the intention of helping to improve it. But you don't focus on what's wrong, you focus on what they're doing and how to do it better. An example would be, let's say you're with somebody and you ask them to boil a pot of water. So they put the pot in the oven. Well, critical analysis would say, well, okay, you might even add a little compliment there, okay? That was a good attempt, okay? Your heart was in the right place, but it works much better if you put the pot on top, with the fire under it. So, okay, so you've analyzed what they did and you've shown them how to do it properly. Okay? You're not putting them down in any way at all. That's critical analysis. And that was a highly revered, it is even today a highly revered and rare skill. The other would be something like this. The other one is what we call critical judgment or just criticism. Okay? So, for instance, in the same situation, somebody who's criticizing would probably say, like, when they put the pot in the oven, "How stupid can you be? Aren't you smart enough to know that you always put the pot on top?" And typically accompanied by an expression of disgust. Okay? And so That's the type of critical judgment. And it doesn't work very well. I won't be telling you why. But that's the first thing to understand. There are these two very different types. And what we're mainly interested in how to work and how to deal with the second type, because it's so common. It's also important to realize, however, that the person, the first person to be affected by the criticism is the person who criticizes. Now, I'll tell you why. Every time you criticize something or someone, it increases the tension inside your own body. And that's why highly critical people are always unhappy. Right? Because regardless of the effect it has on someone else, it always affects the critic. This is because criticism is a kind of rejection of someone, right? Almost a kind of pushing them away, an attack on their worth or their value or their intelligence. Right? Now, consciously or subconsciously, the person being criticized, their subconscious automatically resists attack as if it were directed toward them. Because they're saying it, they're thinking it. And so the subconscious takes it personally and resists that, and that produces the tension. It's possible, we're not going to go into that too much today, but it's possible for there to be so much tension that interferes with both mental and physical functioning. And an awful lot of illnesses are directly associated with the amount of criticizing somebody does. Okay? Or how they react, too, because we're mainly interested today in the reactions. Even if you learn how to deal with criticism directed at you, which I'll teach you, you can't escape the effect when you criticize other people. Keep that in mind. The most effective way to begin dealing with criticism from other people is to reduce your criticism of yourself. Okay? Because that makes you more sensitive to the criticism of other people. Okay? The very worst kind of criticism at all is self-criticism because of that. Because if criticizing other people creates tension in them and tension inside the critic, self-criticism doubles or triples the tension. Because there's no getting away from it. Okay? It's done. It's there. And of course, your own subconscious is going to care. It not only feels bad, it makes you lose faith in yourself. It often creates a habit of expecting criticism from other people. And sometimes hearing criticism, sometimes you even get into the point of hearing criticism or feeling criticized even when it's not intended. There's an old joke that they used to tell when I was in the French-speaking countries. And it was about a French woman who went to her husband and she said, "Do you like this dress?" And he said, "I think it's lovely." And she says, "Oh, you didn't like the one I had on yesterday?" Okay? So even a compliment was taken as a criticism, right? But why do people keep doing it? Why do they keep criticizing? All right. One reason, and you have to admit this, sometimes it works. Sometimes it helps a person change behavior. It doesn't really help them. Let me put it differently. Sometimes it actually influences people to change behavior. The difference is this. They're not doing it because they want to, unless they really know how to do the other things I'll teach you, but they're doing it because they're afraid of criticism. And the lower your self-esteem, the more you are afraid of the criticism from other people. Okay? So if somebody's really afraid of criticism or really hates it, doesn't like it at all, and someone criticizes you trying to make you do something, that's the kind of person who will respond to it by changing behavior. It's not always just to please. It's mostly a fear of being criticized. Mm-hmm. Now a stronger reason though, that is one reason, but there's even a stronger reason. It's a lot easier to point out mistakes than it is to show a better way to do something. Strangely enough, it sounds an awful lot like the political election campaigns that are going on right now. But yeah, because it's a lot easier to criticize than come up with a plan. Okay? And a third reason, this is important, a lot of people don't realize this, or they don't pay attention to it. It gives the critic a feeling of power. And power can be addictive. Okay? And so, because it feels so good, there's a little hit, there's a little power pleasure hit when you can criticize someone else. And sometimes people will get into that they do this to manipulate other people. Just for the power hit. Just to put other people down, because it makes them feel not always better, but there's a pleasure hit. Okay? So now it's time to get into what to do about it. How do you deal with criticism itself? Well, I'm going to give you 3 ways. The first one is easy, and it works a lot of the time. Second one is harder, and it works most of the time. The third one is hard, but it works all the time. So I'm going to give them to you in the sequence. Okay? Number 1 is what we can call a positive yes but. You know, most people use a negative yes but. Somebody will say something good and they'll come up with yes but and go into the negative part. Well, we use a positive yes but. And here's how it would be used. Whenever somebody criticizes you, or even when you criticize yourself, it takes a little bit of conscious awareness to do this, but you immediately and silently give yourself a compliment. Now, the neat part of this is the compliment doesn't have to have anything to do with the criticism, because your own subconscious doesn't care. It doesn't make distinctions like that. So like this, for instance, if someone says to you, you did that wrong, then you would say to yourself, yes, but I do know how to read a book. Okay? Oh, anything else that's good and true. Okay? It's surprising how good that feels. Especially right after a criticism from someone else. Okay? And if you can develop that kind of a thing, then anytime you hear a criticism, anytime you find yourself putting yourself down, remind yourself of something good about yourself. It's got to be good and true. But see, sometimes there's a problem with people here. They put things in a hierarchy of goodness or importance. That's the conscious mind that does that. So yeah, I know how to read a book. So what? Well, you put that down, okay? So that's not going to do you any good. And that's not going to work. The thing is, I try to get across to you, when you're doing that compliment, you're doing it to your body or your subconscious, and it does not judge between compliments. It does not think one is better than the other, or one is more important than the other. Those are false rules made up by the conscious mind. It's ready and willing to take anything. Okay? You could say, if somebody says, that's the most terrible thing I've ever seen, then you can say, yes, but I learned how to tie my shoes when I was 5. Your subconscious will be happy. See? It doesn't care. So remember, it doesn't matter how important you think the compliment is. That's got nothing to do with it. Anything which puts you in a yes, but positive, I can do this, or I've done this, or I am this, or I am this way, anything like that is going to work. Now, I said this works a lot of the time. One reason it doesn't work sometimes is when we get a criticism from somebody we really care about, or somebody whose opinion we value, that hurts worse. That usually is a lot harder to do, especially if your self-esteem is not so high. to begin with. Okay? So this might work sometimes and might not work sometimes, depending on your state of stress and how you're feeling about what they say. Okay? So it's a great technique works a lot, but there are times when there's going to be a criticism that will affect you too strongly. Right? What do you do then? We use number 2. This one we call the slippery agreement. What do we mean by that? Well, this is harder because you have to be willing to seem to accept the criticism. Right? It's a little tricky. So listen, if someone says to you, you did that wrong, and you say, you're right, I didn't do that as well as I could have, and I plan to do better next time. One of the nice side effects of this is it usually leaves the critic with a kind of a glazed look. Yeah, they criticized you. You didn't react like they expected, and it sounded like you agreed with them. But you see, you didn't really. What you did was you took that criticism and turned it into something that you yourself could accept about yourself. It was close enough that almost no one will ever recognize that. Okay? So, here's some more examples that are useful. Critic says, that was a stupid mistake on your part. And you say, yes, it didn't turn out the way I intended, but I'm going to improve my skill. Critic says, you can't do anything right. And you say, you're right, there are a lot of things I could do better, and I'm going to. Okay? The critic says, do you realize how dumb you look in that outfit? And you say, yes, I know I could have picked out a better one, and I'll look for that. Each time you've turned it around into something which is now your statement, not the critic's. And oh boy, does that feel good when you learn how to do this. Okay? And you're not, you don't have to think anything about the other person. You're doing this for yourself. Right? And it's giving you your power back. That's the feeling. Because the feeling of a criticism is somebody has disempowered you, and this brings your power right back. It's a wonderful technique. It really works a lot. Right? The key factor, again, is your ability to seem to say you agree, while you modify what you're agreeing with and make your own choice about what you intend to do about it. Now, here's the hard one. The hard one is called saturation self-esteem. Now, what do we mean by that? To saturate something means to really pile it on, to really fill something up with something. Okay? And that's what we're talking is. A lot of people, sometimes in different cultures, will have a lot of problem with this because the culture is almost designed to keep people from being too proud of themselves. And yes, in a way, that's a good thing. When people think that the only way to be proud of yourself is to put somebody else down. We're not talking about that. I did a lot of research into this, and I came up with the conclusion that pride and humility, true pride and true humility, are the same thing. Both of them consist of actually knowing the truth about yourself. Okay? Without criticism. Okay? So when you are truly proud of yourself for some reason, you don't have to compare that with anybody else. You're good because you're good. You're also humble because you're not comparing it with anybody else. You're not trying to put yourself above, you're just saying who and what you are. And so those two kinds of things become the same thing. Okay? So self-esteem doesn't have anything to do with comparing yourself. It has to do with developing the habit of thinking of yourself as being on the same level as anything or anyone else in the universe. When you can feel yourself, I'm going to quote from something here, when you can feel yourself as being no less than the trees and the stars, and definitely no less than any other human being, you're going to understand that the criticisms of other people are no more than their opinions that have little to nothing to do with you personally. Criticisms at that point become information that you can decide what to do with. You can use it or not use it. Now, as nice as this sounds, it usually takes a while to develop this. For some people, it might need constant reminding of yourself, of your value, of your goodness, of your potential, of whatever. For a while, especially if you've been in the habit of putting yourself down, or you grew up developing that habit because of your environment. And also, part of this is just developing, expanding yourself. People, this is kind of interesting, people often talk a lot in some kinds of teachings about the need to diminish the self. And a lot of this is lost in translation when it gets into English, because the only way people know how to do that in the cold Western modern cultures primarily is to keep putting yourself down, okay? Which is disastrous. It's not the way it's meant in the real teachings. It's just a translation that loses something. Okay? So, since this is the world we're living in, most of us, what we do is try to teach people to expand your sense of self so that you connect with more of the world around you. So yourself is not only you ending at your skin, but it includes other people, it includes your environment, it includes as far as you're willing or able to go. So the real development of self-esteem includes a deep development of a deep conviction of connection with the world around you, and a conviction that underneath all of what we can call the physical camouflage, the universe is always supporting you. That something has to be developed. How do you do it? You do it with the words that you choose to think and say about yourself. You do it with the memories and expectations and even fantasies that you choose to bring up about yourself. You do it with the way you choose to hold yourself when you sit or stand or move, and how you act and behave when you're with other people or with other things. By itself, it isn't really hard to do. It's just something you do. The hard part is when it goes against your habits. And the really hard part is remembering to do it. Okay? The good part of that, doing this, is that as your self-esteem increases, as you feel better and better about yourself in a positive, healthy way, criticisms become less and less important, have less and less effect. And then there's something really interesting that happens. Now, I can only tell you this from experience, myself and all people I've taught to do it. As you begin to think better of yourself than you did, more in a sense of equality with the universe, okay, people stop even thinking about criticizing you. We are all broadcasting who and what we are. Right now it's going out everywhere. Fortunately, not everybody's tuned into our channel, okay? So that's why we don't get people who can read minds. Or if they're tuned into the channel, they're not tuned into particular programs that we're running, okay? But there's some kind of attunement. And part of what people pick up is how you feel about yourself. No matter what kind of front you put up, this broadcast is going out. And the worse you feel about yourself, the more other people will pick up on that. And the ones who tend to be critical will find something to criticize and let you know about it. But as you keep developing, like I said, this good sense of self, even when those come up, they become less important until they don't matter anymore. Somebody's saying something that they feel, okay. But then you become putting out something which puts you in such an unequal level with the world around you that the thought of criticizing you no longer occurs to someone. Now, self-esteem is a path, not a doorway. You don't say, I'm going to increase my self-esteem, step through the door, and you're it. Okay? I'm not saying it couldn't happen that way. I've never found an experience where it has, but it's a big universe. It could. But most people find that it's something you have to develop day by day, and if you keep doing it, it gets better and better and better, until finally you'll start realizing how different you are and how differently you are treated. And that's the story of self-esteem. Okay? Pau, olelo. The telling is over. Mahalo. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, we are going to, I'm teaching this, and we share all this knowledge on behalf of an organization called Aloha International. And this is a free meeting, and I want you to feel comfortable with that. There's no charge whatsoever of any kind. We have some projects that you might be interested in. And so these projects, some of them, we have two booklets primarily that we publish, and we mail them out free to individuals all over the entire world, everywhere. We have, if you haven't picked them up, there's a pink booklet and a blue booklet. Feel free to take one of each. We also have these translated into about 25 different languages online for free download. We maintain a website that has a lot of interesting stuff. It has a place where you can go and ask for healing, a place where you can actually, through the magic of web design, send a healing. You get great feedback when you do that. Okay? We also have a library of over 300 articles on self-development, on Hawaiian culture, on lots and lots of things that will help you do the things you want to do, and that's all free. Okay? So if you think you'd like to help us do any of that stuff, why, we'd appreciate it very much. So I'm going to pass Calabash around. Yes? We can do questions right after we finish this. Yes, right. Okay, so I'm going to pass the Calabash. Now, when we finish, we are also going to do a healing blessing. We have a very special handout that we're going to give you, and we use some pieces of nature that people have sent to us from all over the world. And so if you have someone in mind that you care about, and it could be yourself, but if you have someone in your mind you care about that you'd like to help, why, I'm going to pass out these baskets. They feel a little heavy, but just take something out of there so we can use it for the session. And then we'll put it back in to do its work when we finish. Now, while all of this is happening, do we have any questions on anything I was talking about? Yes?
I got a lot bubbling in the old head, but one of the first things you said really intrigued me. When you talked about criticism, you talked about Hawaiians had different definitions of criticism. You said one was this critical analysis, and then the others were...
The other were various forms of negative criticism.
So why? Why did Hawaiians have so many different forms of negative criticism and just one?
Because it was so important to them. The foundation of the culture is aloha. And aloha it means love, but it also means mercy and kindness. And friendship, it has connotations of that. And it all has to do with living and acting in harmony with people. Criticizing disharmonizes people. And so anything that did that was carefully analyzed. And so the important parts of Hawaiian culture always have a lot of different terms. The negative ones so that you know exactly what's happening, and the positive ones as well. Yes? So they had real refinements for those. You know, different cultures look at things in different ways, and they give more names to those things that are more important to the culture. In a typical, let's call it indigenous, but in a typical indigenous culture around the world, they don't pay much attention to colors. Hawaiians had about half a dozen, roughly approximating the rainbow, names of colors. That's it. We can look at a computer screen, and on that screen we can have millions of colors, each with its own name. The Hawaiians didn't do that. So we have a very visual culture. Colors are very, very important. Hawaiians also had hundreds of names for wind. And they got very refined. There's one name I love. It's called anuhea. And anuhea is the type of breeze that carries a perfume right along the cliffs. It gets that refined. Okay? So sound and odor and wind, those were very, very, very important parts of the culture and have many, many more names than we could conceive of. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
So you can develop this esteem and work on it really hard, but sometimes we get stressed out and then all of a sudden we're back into the old behavior. So how can we use that to...
Well, I recommend starting a compliment club. So you have somebody that you can call and say, "Oh, I really need a compliment because I can't think of any about myself." And they start telling you how wonderful you are. And that'll start pulling you out of it. That's really helpful. And that's spreading aloha. Yeah. Yes?
I was going to ask about if you feel that you have really messed up.
Yes.
And it's hard for you to forgive yourself.
Okay.
Or something that, you could forgive others.
Sure. The only reason it's hard is because you say it's hard. And it's not your habit. That's all. So if you can forget all that, forgiveness is one of the ways to start. And forgiveness of yourself is the most important kind. I just posted on the internet, I posted a quote from an Aboriginal elder from a book he wrote that I was reading. And he said, forgiveness can be hard. He said, but forgiveness is all about yourself. It's your healing. It's got nothing to do with the person who might have done something wrong. So if we can remember that part of it, a lot of people find it hard to forgive because they think they're empowering the other person. That's not how it works. It's not what it's for. It's to free you. Okay? Now, if you can start thinking of it that way, you're going to find it easier to do. Okay? Yeah.
I'll give a very good example. I think I'm going through right now. Really having a stroke of bad luck. Example, I lost the keys to my car, and which means and it's one of these things where the car, an old fancy car that has a computer chip in the key, which means you're going to bring it to the dealer. Well, now how do you get to the dealer without the key? Right? And then also I mentioned to Gloria that I lost the cord to my computer charging cord. Because I'm on the road right now. I'm traveling, being transferred, moving from place to place. But the place I just moved into, my roommate, it seems to be affecting him more than, I said, damn it, I lost this. I'm laughing about it. Dumb me, boink, dummy. But he's jumping on me, you lot. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so how is it affecting
That's because
it's affecting him more than affecting me.
Remember I say we're broadcasting all the time? We're all in telepathic connection, whether you like it or not. Okay? So when you are criticizing yourself, especially with someone else who is sensitive, even if you're criticizing yourself, that person's subconscious is hearing it and taking it personally, to some degree.
So, everybody's got one?
No, I didn't get one.
Okay. It's coming to you. Okay. We go. Okay. So we're going to practice our blessing technique. with the help of this. So first of all, this can represent somebody in your life. So think of somebody in your life that maybe you haven't told them how much you appreciate them, as much as you would like to. Somebody you'd like to really communicate all the love and happiness you feel about them. And this is going to be the practice of that. So tell this part of nature, thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for representing this friend, this person. Now that you've given it instruction, now I want you to, with your eyes open or closed, it doesn't matter, start to compliment. Tell it how wonderful it is, how beautiful it is, how you appreciate that it exists, that you're a part of the universe together. And then think of all the things about your friend that you haven't told them and that you'd like to tell them, and tell that to this part of nature right now. Friend, you're a strength for me. Friend, you are a companion to me. You give me joy that I can know you, that I can count on you. I love that we've met in this lifetime. You're so beautiful, you're so wonderful, you're so dependable, you're so great. And as you're feeling these feelings, and your part of nature is feeling loved and feeling appreciated, we're going to sing you a song about love, what it means. Aloha is compassion for all things on earth, all love for all of life, and ending to all strife, our recognition of our worth. The power of love is a mighty force to change the world by changing from within. This is how we all begin. The spreading of aloha is what we've set out to do. Come and join us, all of you. So to this part of nature, to our friends, mahalo.
And when you put this friend of nature back into the basket, remember to give it the breath of life so that it will retain our prayers and our intentions for the weeks to come. Mahalo.
Mahalo. All right, so send the baskets back around. We have time for more questions. If you have any, it can be about this topic. It can be about Hawaiian culture, and I'll share what I know.
I'm curious why they don't define that Hawaiians don't have more words for color, because there's so much color here.
I know we see it. They don't, because it wasn't so important to them. Okay? Feelings, for instance, were much more important than the visual aspect. Okay? Feelings in the sense of touch and even emotional feelings. Okay? Were just a more important part of the culture. So it's like, how come we don't have 200 words for wind? Okay? The same kind of thing.
Around, so there's nothing to compare to.
That's right. Yes.
Can you talk about the other 13 times of criticism?
I just happen to have made a list of them. Sure. One of the names is loi loi. And this means to search for flaws. Now, since we're trying to translate, we're not going to get all the fine meanings that would be in Hawaiian. So these English translations are trying to get as close as we can. One common one is ke. And this means to point out mistakes. to complain. Now, there were some hula teachers who would use this, and some who were taught that this is the way you're supposed to do it. But there are others who would use the paka style, okay? But so, again, that comes from, like I said, there are people we've grown up, been taught that the way to get someone to change for the better is to tell them what they're doing wrong, okay? But I'm also telling you it's very inefficient. Let's see another one, hala hala, which is fault finding. Ku hala hala, very close, means to criticize in general. Hala is a word that has to do with falling off the path, and it was translated by the missionaries as sin, but it means error, mistake. But falling off the path, hidden behind that is a deeper meaning in Hawaiian, which means the solution is to get back on the path. Okay? But we don't get that fine thing when we're listening to it in English. Neo is the same as ke. Akeu means to contradict, to hinder. It's that kind of criticizing, okay? Which is slightly different. Wele wele iwi means to strip the bones of flesh. Very graphic. This is to criticize one's kin. And probably this was a hidden meaning in the story that I told you, because wele wele, some people would call it vele vele or wele vele, is an awful lot like wili wili. And Hawaiians love to make wordplay with sound-alikes. Okay? Ainema nema means to criticize severely, not just to search for flaws, but to hunt for them and to split hairs. Okay? Another one is a'anema, to criticize maliciously, to malign. Okay? So we do have a word in English that's close. Nema nema means to belittle. Ka'anema is the same. And finally, ake, which simply means to criticize or to slander. That's a slightly different twist on it. Okay. So those were the words. Okay. Remember paka, forget about all the others. Okay.